Hey guys, it's Edit Ebenezer again from Semani Enterprise Tutors, and today we are going to be learning on how to copy database objects or database details from RAM to room. Okay, so this is a sample run of the application we're going to be creating. So these details displayed right here is details gotten from the RAM database, and when we click on this button, it's going to copy all this from the RAM database to our RAM database and then display the object here. So if I just play the video, you'll see it in no second. User clicks on the database copy button. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing, and we're going to be doing that in Android Studio. So I'll just close this. Okay, so first of all, create a new Android application, and then have the target SDK to 26 and the minimum SDK to 29. Okay, so the first thing we're going to be looking at is our dependencies. So we need a few dependencies here. The first dependency we're going to be needing is the room dependency. So I'll just get that from here, copy and paste that. Okay, so I'll explain. We need a few dependencies. Okay, first off, what we have here is Lombok library. This will be used to reduce or to erase boilerplate of the getter and setter method of our Pojo classes. Okay, the next one we have here is butter knife, which will be used for view injection. And then the last one we have here is our room database. Okay, so apart from this, we're also going to be needing to add we're also going to need RAM plugin. So just at the top of your app level gradle file, just include this apply plugin RAM, that, and then on your project level gradle file we're going to include this also. Okay, and once you have that, you're going to sync, and then we'll just wait for a few seconds for it to sync. Okay, so while that syncs, the next thing we're going to be needing is to set up our room database. Okay, so the room database is made up of three components. Mainly, number one is the entity, number two is the data access object class, and then number three is the database class. Okay, so the entity serves as a mapping for our table. So we're going to come to app Java, right click. I hope we can still do this. Wow. Okay, so new Java class file, and then we are going to name this user and click OK. Okay, so this will serve as our entity class. Now the first thing we are going to be needing to do here is first we are going to add the annotation at entity. Okay, so we're going to add the annotation at entity. So I'll do that straight away at entity. Okay, our grid is done building. So we're going to add our entity annotation here. Meanwhile, room will automatically create a table with the name of this class, which is user with uppercase U. But if you don't want that, you can override that by adding a property to this entity called table name, and then for this we're going to name it users. Okay, now in all room entity classes, there ought to be a primary key. So we're going to create our primary key and name it ID, and then to indicate your primary key you have to annotate it with primary key, and then we can also add to true, since we are not going to be explicitly adding that. So for this user, each user is going to have a name, each user is going to have an email, and then each user is going to have an address. Okay, so I'll just include private, and then we're going to be using Lombok to reduce boilerplate code for our getter and setter method. So this class is set. So this is for our entity. Now the next thing we want to deal with is we want to deal with the DAO. Is called database access object. Okay, so the DAO is where you specify the method that will be used to interact with your database, that's your room database. Okay, such as how to include a new user into the database, to delete if need be. But for this, we'll only be adding, and then we'll also be getting we'll be adding to the database, and then we'll also be retrieving everything from the database so that we can display it on our Android application. Okay, so the next thing you want to do, and take note, the DAO, which is the DAO, must be an abstract class or an interface. Okay, so we're going to come here, right click, go to new Java class file. We're going to call this user DAO, and then we're going to change this to an interface, and then we're going to click OK. Now the first thing you have to do to indicate this as a DAO is you're going to annotate it, yes you guess, with DAO. Alright, and then we're going to include some methods. So we're going to have the first method will be public void add user with a user argument, and then this will have the annotation insert, because this is the method we'll be calling in order for us to insert users into our database. And then the next thing we want is public return a list of users. Okay, and then we're going to call this get all users. Okay, and then we're going to annotate it. We're going to be using the query annotation here, and then we're going to be specifying our query, which will be select all from users. Now this users is the name of the table that we indicated here. Okay, so that is users. Okay, now this is all for our DAO. The last thing we're going to be needing to set up our room database is our database class. Now your database class must extend from your room database, and it must be an abstract class. Alright, it must also return an abstract method. It must contain an abstract method that returns an object of the DAO, your DAO here. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to come here, right click, go to new Java class file, specify this as abstract, and then we're just going to call this user database, and then we're going to click on OK. Now the only thing that we're going to be needing is, first of all, we want to extend, so you must extend room database, and then we have to add the annotation database here, database, and then it must contain the entities. So we'll specify an entity, which is our user class, and then we can specify the version here, version number of the database as 1. So the next thing we're going to be adding is an abstract method which will return the DAO, which is our DAO. Then we're just going to say public abstract user DAO person DAO, or we could change this to user DAO. Okay, so that is all for our room database. So we have successfully set up our room database. Now before we move further, let us set up our layout. Our layout will look, so I'll just get rid of that. And then I'm just going to copy and paste so that I won't waste time explaining the view, the layout. Okay, so while that is moving or loading, now this is how application will look. So let me just zoom in a little bit. So this is where the realm database object will be displayed, and then when the user clicks on this button, it will copy, the application will copy what exists in the realm database and then pass it to the room database, and then we'll display the object here. Okay, now that being said, the next thing we want to do is we want to start setting up our realm database. And the first thing we want to do in setting up our realm database is we want to create a new Pojo class. So we're going to name this person, and then this must extend realm object. Okay, and just like for the room, we're going to have 3 private strings, so name, address, and email, and then we're going to be using Lombok so that we can escape boilerplate codes. Okay, so this sets up our Pojo class for our realm database. Now we're going to head over to our activity class, our main activity class. The first thing we want to do is we want to first instantiate our realm. So in order to do that, you first create a realm object. I'll call this realm. Okay, and then we first want to initialize it in our application. So realm.init has a context of this, and then we want to get the default, and then we want to get the default instance. So we're going to say realm dot, okay, so we say realm is equals to realm dot get default instance. Okay, so that will be that. And then the next thing we want to do is first we want to manually create our realm object. Okay, so we're going to be creating our realm object. So we're going to have a method called create realm object. Create realm object, and then for our create realm object, we're going to be creating 3 person objects. Okay, now we'll first of all begin a realm transaction, because all transactions must be carried within a transaction block. So realm.begin transaction, first here we create a person object. So person eben is equal to realm.create, and then we set the name, we set the address, the email, and then we create a second person called Joe, set the name, set the address, the email, and lastly we create a person called Sam, where we set the name, the address, and the email. And then in order for us to close this, we add the commit transaction line, which will commit all the transactions that has been performed on that realm. Okay, so the next thing we want to do now is we want to inject our views using butter knife. So place your cursor right in the layout file, press the keys Alt Enter, generate butter knife injection. So I'll just wait while that pops up. Okay, so we'll be needing the element button, we'll just be needing the on click, and then we'll take the realm details text view and the realm details text view, and then click on OK. So we'll have this block of code generated for us. This and this for the on click of the button. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we want to have a method that will immediately show the details of the REM database once the application is launched. So we're going to come here and add this method called show REM DB content. So we're going to create the method, and then for the show REM DB object, what we are going to do is firstly we are going to need to declare a global variable or a field called result, a REM result list of persons called result, and then in this our method utilizing this result to all the results or to all the objects in our REM database. So we're going to say rem dot where person dot class dot find all, and then we're going to call another method called show content. Now this method is what we're going to be using to, and then we're going to be showing it, that will be showing it on the text view. Okay, so this method takes results list of persons and then takes a text view ID. So we passed in this REM details ID injected by Butterknife for us here, and then what we want to do in this method is we want to look through the results, and then we want to add them or display them in our text view. So I'll walk you through the code. First of all, we created a string called text display details to display, and then we use this for loop to loop through the result which is being passed here now, which would contain all the objects in our REM database. Okay, so when we look through all the results, we append them to this string details to display. We get the name, get the email. We get the name by calling result.get I, the current position, .get name, .get email, .get address, and then we now set the value or set the text of this text we pass into this method to be the details gotten from this loop. Okay, now since that is done, the next thing we want to do is we want to copy. Once the user clicks on this button, we want to copy the content of the REM database to our REM database. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is to call a method copy from room, right? Okay, so we're going to create this method copy from REM to room. Now this method is responsible for getting all the details in our REM and then passing it and storing it in our room database. Now for us to do that, we have to first initialize our database here. So we'll go to the top of this file and create a new variable. So public static user database, which is this, create an object called user database, and then right in our onCreate method we're going to initialize it. So we're going to say user database is equals to room dot database builder. The context we're going to say get application context, and then we're going to call in our database class, and then the name of the database being users, and then because room does not allow us to run or carry out operations on the main UI thread, we're going to add this line of code which is allow main thread queries. Okay, so once we have that, we're now going to fall back to this method, copy from rem to room, and then now copy from rem to room, we're going to have something like this. Okay, now let me explain this. What this does is, since we already have initialized our result variable here, result is equal, so this already contains all the object of our rem database. Okay, so we pass this into a for loop, and then for each loop now, and then we create a new user, and then for every loop we initialize the name, the email, and the address, and then we use our DAO object and this method that is made available through the DAO, and then we add the user to our database. So main activity dot user database dot user DAO, which is being passed to us here, sorry, this DAO here, which is being passed to us, and then we now get this method add user, passing in the user we want to add to the database, which is being specified as this object user for every loop. Now the next thing after that is being done is we want to display the content of our room database. So once we copy from rem to room, the next thing we want to do is have a method that will help us display the room content. Okay, so we create that method. The next thing we now want to do is we want to first of all get the list of the users in our room database. So we're going to say list of users, or user called users. I'll just press Alt Enter there. We're now going to say main activity dot user database. We're still going to be using our DAO made available for us, so get all users. Now the next thing we want to do is to call that same method show content, and then pass in the ID of our room database text view right here. Okay, so we're going to, so for our method show content, we'll just create a duplicate of the show content method formerly before here. Okay, so the only difference between these two is that this show content method takes its first parameter to be a list of users, and then second parameter the same signature as the first one, a text view. Okay, so this is just as explained before. This is a string called details to display, and then this loops through each user object that is being sent in here, and then it gets their details, appends them using this plus equals to sign, and then displays in the text view passed to it these details. And then guys, that's how you copy from rem to room, and then in our next tutorial video we're going to be copying from room to rem. So thank you for watching, and God bless you.